Today, we're talking about what to do when your partner won't change and why nothing you try seems to work. Resistance to change is almost never about your partner's character. It's the relationship system responding to perceived threat. Sarah has had the same conversation with her husband, Marcus, for 6 years. Marcus nods, he says he gets it, and then nothing changes. By the time Sarah finds this video, she's starting to wonder if she married the wrong person. If any part of that sounds familiar, stay with me because I'm going to be giving you a complete framework I've developed called the repair protocol. It draws on decades of couples research from some of the sharpest minds in the field to answer one specific question. What do you actually do when it feels like your partner won't change? The goal is not to overpower the resistance, it's to change the conditions that make it necessary. First, there are three primary reasons partners resist. First, sometimes it's the nervous system, not a character issue. When your partner feels flooded in a conflict, their brain activates a threat response before conscious thought is even online. Their survival system has taken over. Second, sometimes what looks like stubbornness is actually a protective wall around something much more vulnerable. Third, and this is the one nobody wants to hear, some things about your partner genuinely will not change. Couples who flourish don't solve those problems, they actually learn to live with them in a completely different way. Now, the fact that you're part of this system is not blame. It's actually the most hopeful thing I can say because it means that you actually have influence. You don't have to wait for your partner to go first. That's what the repair protocol is built on. So let's get into it. R stands for recognize the cycle. The enemy is the pattern, not your partner. Every couple in distress has what researchers call a negative interaction cycle, a sequence of moves and counter moves that run almost on autopilot once it gets triggered. The cycle is not really about dishes or money or who forgot to text back. The actual fight underneath every fight is always some sort of version of, do I matter to you? Am I safe with you? Or are you still here? When Sarah brings up emotional connection, she's really asking, am I important to you? But the way she brings it up after days of simmering frustration lands on Marcus as criticism. He hears, you're failing. So Marcus shuts down to avoid something he'll regret. Sarah sees his shutdown and pushes harder because his silence feels like confirmation that he doesn't care. Marcus withdraws further and Sarah escalates further. Neither of them is wrong. Both of them are trapped in this cycle. Literally give the cycle a name. Because the moment you can say, I think we just stepped into our thing, instead of, you always do this, you've created a gap. And that gap is where change begins. But you might object. You might say something like, that's great in theory, but how do you recognize the cycle when your partner refuses to recognize the cycle with you? Well, you don't wait. You go first. Some things that can help are privately mapping the cycle. You do this on your own and get brutally honest. What triggers it? What do you do next? What does your partner do in response to that? And what do you do after that? Interrupt your move, not theirs. If one part of the system changes consistently, the system must reorganize. It may reorganize toward more engagement or confusion, then curiosity, or even temporary distance, but it can't stay identical if your behavior truly shifts. So practically, one more thing here is if your heart rate gets above roughly 100 beats per minute during a conflict, Gottman's research shows that your brain is no longer capable of constructive conversation. So call it what it is. I'm flooded. And take a 10 to 20 minute break, not to plan your next argument, to actually let your nervous system calm down and then come back. And when you do come back, start soft with something like, I feel blank when blank. Would you be willing to fill in the blank? And be specific with that request. Before we continue, if this has been helpful, please hit like and subscribe so that it can reach more people who need it. The E in repair stands for excavate primary emotions. What's underneath the anger is what actually needs to be heard. Most of the time, emotions that show up loudly in an argument is covering quieter, more vulnerable ones. Underneath the anger is almost always fear or grief or shame. James gets quiet and cold when Pam makes plans without checking in with him first. Pam reads it as controlling behavior and pushes back really hard. What she doesn't know, what James himself has never really put into words, is that when she makes plans without him, he feels completely invisible, like a roommate, not a husband. The coldness isn't control, it's anxious grief. When James finally said that out loud in a session, I feel like I just don't exist when that happens. Pam's entire posture changed. She wasn't defending against that. She was actually heartbroken by it. It's important to note that before we can share our primary emotions with another, we have to find them ourselves. That's the thing that, if expressed from a vulnerable place rather than an attacking place, has the power to land completely differently with your partner. You might object, though, I've tried being vulnerable and my partner just uses it against me or shuts down even more. And that is a real risk, and I don't want to minimize it. Vulnerability isn't magic, and the key is timing and framing. If your partner consistently weaponizes your vulnerability, that's important information. That may require a different kind of support than a YouTube video, and I'd encourage you to seek it. The P in repair stands for position yourself differently. If you want the relationship system to change, you have to change your position within it. Not because it's fair, it often isn't fair, but because a system cannot stay the same when one of its elements genuinely changes. If we go back to Sarah and Marcus, Sarah got homework in therapy that felt completely backward. Stop bringing up the emotional connection conversation for 2 weeks. Not permanently, just for 2 weeks. When Sarah heard that, she was furious. So I just pretend everything's fine? No, just show up warmly and turn toward Marcus when he makes small bids for connection. And stop approaching the situation with an agenda. By day 10 of that, Marcus initiated a conversation about how things had been feeling between them that week. He'd been doing his own processing, but the relentless pursuit had made it feel impossible for him to actually share it. The practical move here is simple, but not easy. Identify your most automatic reactive behavior in conflict and deliberately do the opposite. Not forever, not as a manipulation. Just try a genuine experiment. If you typically pursue, practice backing off from a place of security, not defeat. Why should I be the one who changes? I'm not the problem here. That's a real possibility. But here's the thing, changing your moves isn't about admitting you're the problem. It's about recognizing that you're the only variable in the system you can actually control. Waiting for your partner to go first is a strategy, but it hasn't been working. This isn't about fairness, it's about influence. The A in repair stands for accept what is fixed. Grieve the partner you expected and love the one who is actually there. This might be the most countercultural move in this entire framework. Some things about your partner will not change, not because they don't love you and not because they're defective, but because those traits are part of who they are. Gottman's 40 years of research found that the couples who learned to hold their perpetual problems with humor and affection and acceptance, rather than treating them as evidence that they married the wrong person, those marriages lasted and were happier. Let me share another therapy story with you. Diane is a planner. Tom is spontaneous in a way that used to feel really exciting and mostly feels like anxiety now for Diane. Diana spent 12 years trying to convert Tom into a planner. Tom has spent 12 years feeling like he was a total disappointment. What shifted in therapy wasn't that Tom became more organized. It was that Diane started to see his spontaneity not as a character flaw, but as the same quality that made him fun, present, and unafraid. These were qualities she was drawn to. She stopped treating his nature as a problem to be solved. Beneath every stubborn position is a dream, a value, a history, something that matters at a core level. Gridlock lifts when each partner's underlying dream gets witnessed and honored by the other. You don't have to share the dream, even. You have to see it. The hard part of this step is that it involves real loss. There's a version of your partner you expected. Maybe you imagined this person before you fully knew them. Maybe they've changed over the years. Letting go of that expected version and grieving it clears the space to see and love the person who is actually there. You might have an objection, though, something like, isn't acceptance just giving up or enabling bad behavior? And there's a crucial difference between accepting your partner's personality and accepting harmful behavior. Accepting your husband or your wife as an introvert who will never love parties is acceptance. Accepting that he or she regularly demeans you in front of other people is not acceptance. That's a dignity issue that requires a completely different response. Acceptance in this framework means releasing the demand that someone be fundamentally different than they are, not tolerating behavior that crosses genuine lines. The I in repair stands for invite new experience. Change is neurological, so create conditions for the brain to update its model. Your brain is not passively taking in reality. It's constantly generating predictions about what's going on, what will happen next, based on past experiences. And it only updates those predictions when it encounters something genuinely surprising. So let's go back to James and Pam. Pam had always responded to James' coldness by defending herself, explaining why her plans were reasonable, why he was being unreasonable. I invited her to try something completely different. The next time James went cold, instead of defending, she sat next to him, put her hand on his arm, and said, I can tell something landed wrong for you. Help me understand what it was. James had never experienced that response. His nervous system had no prediction for it. He cried. And they had the first real conversation about what was actually happening in their marriage that day. Next time your partner says something that normally triggers you, instead of responding, ask one curious question. Start there. Small things like a 6-second hug at departure or reunion, a genuine daily check in with eye contact, without an agenda or phones, going to bed at the same time a few times a week, are nervous system interventions that make everything else in the framework more possible. The last R in repair stands for rebuild the foundation. De escalation is necessary, but the positive infrastructure is what really sustains a relationship. All the conflict resolution stuff is necessary, but it's not sufficient. Carol and David had been in conflict management mode for 3 years. They'd gotten better at fighting. I pointed out something that they hadn't noticed, though. They had stopped being friends. They didn't laugh together anymore. They didn't ask each other questions out of genuine curiosity. They co-managed their household with the warmth of competent business partners. When I asked Carol what she'd loved about David when they first met, she burst into tears. Not because it was gone, but because she'd stopped looking for it. So the sixth move is to start making deposits again, deliberately. This looks like continuing to update the picture of your partner's current inner world. Not who they were when you got married, who they are right now. Their current fears, their current dreams, what they're proud of, what they're carrying in their life. Let me come back to Sarah and Marcus. The last I heard, they're still together. Not because Marcus became a different person, not because Sarah stopped wanting what she wanted, but because Sarah stopped waiting for Marcus to go first. And Marcus, in the safety of a different kind of conversation, finally said some things he'd never been able to say. It didn't happen in a week. It didn't happen without some setbacks, but it happened. Now, I need to say one thing directly. This protocol assumes a relationship where both people are physically safe and where beneath the dysfunction, there's real love. If you're in a relationship with ongoing abuse or with a partner who has categorically or permanently checked out, the most courageous thing may be something different entirely. Please get support from a licensed clinician who can help you think through this clearly. You deserve that. There's a printable repair guide with all 6 moves, the practical scripts and the reflection questions, and a weekly tracker. It's all linked below. No email required. If this was useful, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe if you want more of this. I'll see you in the next one.